While our community is a global one, our school, and therefore our talk today, is hosted in Chibuktuk, Mi'kmaq in the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq Nation. We're honored to speak, gather, and make artwork here. My name is Molly Cronin. I'm the host of Artwork, and each month I have the pleasure of sitting down with two of our esteemed alum. And this month I'm excited to be talking with Cassie Seaboyer. Am I pronouncing your last name correctly, Cassie?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. And Amanda Burt to talk about their work in film and also theater and the kind of work in production and that they have done since their time at NASCAD. So Amanda and Cassie, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
great to be here.
So to get us started, I want to like do a little throwback. I'd love to hear about your time at NASCAD, when you were here, what you were studying, and maybe some influential people that you were talking to. Cassie, do you want to get us started?
Sure. Yeah. So I went to NASCAD. I started back in 2013, and I went to NASCAD just focusing on drawing and painting, and I had no idea about film or theater. And while I was there, I was working with professors like Jeff Daum, Marilyn McAvee, I do believe, Becca Barker, and they kind of introduced me into this world of animation, character design, all that good stuff. And they allowed me to, as I mentioned, like I was focused on drawing and painting, which was great, but they introduced me to working 3D instead. And that was kind of the big game changer for me. So it was interesting with NASCAD starting. And I was very much had blinders on that I wanted to do a certain thing, and I changed gears completely. And those were the professors that really guided that and encouraged it.
Amazing. Thanks, Cassie. Amanda, what about you?
Yeah, I grew up in Toronto, and it's funny, I saw a poster for a Sloan record called Twice Removed up at Sam the Record Man in Toronto, and I was really up in the air whether I was going to move to Whistler or Halifax. And when I saw that poster, I was like, they seem like people I would know and seems like a cool place. And that's literally how the coin flip happened of ending up in Halifax. But I went to Dal my first year, and honestly, it was so boring that I thought I would leave, but I stayed the summer after my first year and totally changed my mind about the city and the province and the people and everything about it, and transferred to King's and NASCAD starting my second year. So I did contemporary studies at King's, and I don't know about now, but back then you had to do a combined honors and do something else with it. So I worked really hard to do an art history second degree, which was kind of complicated to do, but that's how I ended up at NASCAD. So my main teacher was Bruce Barber. I worked with David Howard, Jane Warwick, Gary Kennedy, Bob Bean for photo, James McSwain taught me Super 8. And, there's lots of people that are still in the NASCAD community now. So Aaron Langell runs the gallery, and Rebecca Young runs the library. They're good friends of mine and the same era. Gary Markle was at the beginning of his teaching career there, and Becca Barker, actually, I know from back in those days too. So yeah, NASCAD was really just this new world that was connected to a greater world of art and music making that I was beginning to be a part of in those early years.
And Amanda, did you know that film or working in the kind of film industry might be something you were interested in, or what was your time at NASCAD and how did it influence that trajectory?
I always loved movies, and I still do. And it's funny that I've kind of gone back to watching movies like old silent films, black and white, 40s, stuff that I watched when I was a kid, which maybe is not normal for a kid. But when I was at NASCAD, I definitely learned a lot of practical skills like darkroom, Super 8, lighting things properly, a little bit of offline editing, how to use a switcher, how to use green screen, all that stuff. But the things that I really learned that I credit 100% to NASCAD were collaboration, like working on other people's projects and just being there. So I felt like every project that I saw at school when I was there, it's the same people, it just, the dial turned of whose it was, but everyone else helped out. Those relationships that you build in school and those creative collaborations that you build at the beginning of your career and that continue with you, how to talk about my own work and respond to other people's work by taking your ego out of the way. And something I was honestly just talking about the other day with somebody who was upset that CBC had passed on a TV show idea. And that's happened to me a lot. So we were just jamming on it. And out of that conversation, we were just talking about like, well, there's people that are kind of stuck in their ways, and there's people that have a DIY spirit. And the DIY spirit for me came from working at NASCAD and or doing school there, hanging with people, being part of a greater art community. So yeah, everything I do now is honestly thanks to those early days of figuring out how to access my voice and be a part of other people's projects as well.
I love that. I think NASCAD has a very scrappy spirit that I think carries with us in our careers.
Yeah.
Cassie, you talked about the transition from 2D to 3D being really influential in getting you interested in the potentials of those new media. But can you talk a bit about a precise moment or a project or something that propelled you into this world that you're working in now?
Right. So I feel like like a big moment that stands out to me would be in my year 2 drawing class with Marilyn. Loved that drawing class. I noticed my drawing skills improving so much. So it was really awesome. But at the end, she did a treat for us where she brought in her portfolio, which had a focus on her time working on Titanic.
Yes.
And like she brought in the actual props, like the fake money she had photos of this film set she worked on. She talked about all these different departments. And I think that was my first time talking to someone and seeing their portfolio and like hearing right from them what film was exactly. I grew up in such a small town where typically people don't move away. And film theater world was just something never on my radar that was actually doable. I had no idea there was even a film community in Nova Scotia till I moved away and went to NASCAD. And I was like, well, if Marilyn was able to do it, like maybe I can, like maybe I can get involved with this. And it was just so inspiring. And after that presentation, that's what motivated me to try the animation course with Becca Barker. Now, in that class, we were focusing more so with the computers. And I do not do computers well. I am useless when it comes to computers. So I told Becca this and I said, but I'm interested in stop motion. And she was like, that's great. That's awesome. And I got to build my stop motion puppets, like the characters, they move, they pose, the set and everything. And that really was like, oh yeah, I do like this world. I don't quite know what this world is yet, but this is good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, can you tell us a little bit about the world that you're running in? Can you tell us a bit about the work that you're doing now?
Yeah, so I now am a prosthetic makeup artist. I'm actually in my makeup trailer that
Cool.
I'm working out of today. So yeah, I do prosthetic makeup and I am also like a props builder. I build props for film and theater. I also build puppets for film and theater as well. I very much bounce between the film world and theater world. And there's a lot of overlaps there as well. Costumes as well. But yeah, the prosthetic world is my favorite with film. I don't do any of the beauty makeup, so don't ask me to do your lashes or anything, because I won't know what I'm doing. But if you want to be turned into a demonic character and blood and whatnot, that's where my passion is. And then yeah, when I'm not on film sets, I'm at Neptune Theatre. I am kind of their puppet person / weird in between projects. I kind of fill that place where, is it a prop? Is it a costume? What is it? And it's Cassie. It's been me to kind of be that person. And it's been great. It's been busy. It's been very busy and it's all good stuff.
Oh, that's great to hear. Yeah, I imagine that there's that funny crossover between character and prop often with the puppets as well. So sounds like you've got a lot on your plate. Yeah. Amanda, can you tell us? Oh, sorry, go on, Cassie. Is there something else you want to say?
Oh, no, I'm good.
Okay. Amanda, can you tell us a bit about Banger Media and your work as a producer there?
Yeah, Banger started, it's probably 20 years ago, with a film called Metal, A Headbanger's Journey, which was based on one of the founders, a master's thesis in anthropology about the anthropological history of that genre, and it really took off. And it's interesting because I actually met them 20 years ago. In between schooling, I worked at TIFF for 2 years as a program assistant on Midnight Madness, and in my second year, they debuted their film. So that's how I got to know them. And it was, years later, just because we knew each other in the industry, and or they'd come to my DJ nights or whatever it was, they actually kind of scooped me up to go and work at Banger. But over the years, they've sort of expanded between heavy metal and hard rock documentaries to doing docs on, say, ZZ Top and Iron Maiden and Tragically Hip. They had a Peabody winning series called Hip Hop Evolution that did really well, which led to the show that I started on, which is called This Is Pop, which was originally called Pop Evolution. So that was on Netflix, and that was a series of 8 documentaries on pop music, which, when I left CBC, where I was working at the time, to go to Banger to do that, I had never made a music doc, and I had never made 8 music docs at the same time. But it was pretty awesome. And I definitely dug into a lot of my background that, we're talking about today to do that. So now at Banger, I'm working on a documentary on Y2K boy bands, which when Y2K was happening, I was not listening to boy bands. I was actually interviewing the Moffats, if anyone remembers the Moffats, for this doc like 2 weeks ago. And they reminded me that they hosted the 2000 Junos, which I was actually at with Thrush Hermit, because I was dating a guy in Thrush Hermit at the time. And Thrush Hermit lost to Len, Steal My Sunshine. And these little kids called the Moffats were actually hosting. Anyhow, we talked about that, and I was like, yeah, that was where my brain was at in Y2K. But yeah, so my work at Banger is as a director, but also as a creative producer. So I'm not always the person looking for money. I'm not always the person crewing up, although certainly I'm involved in those conversations really deeply. But I'm the person that's responsible for getting things made, but also bringing teams together, collaborators together, and figuring out what's best to serve the story, the film, the series, whatever it is, and how to make it new and different, and break barriers of the kind of storytelling that we're trying to do. So it's a pretty fun gig right now.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Can you tell us a little bit about your trajectory from NASCAD to this work? Like you mentioned that you worked at CBC and at TIFF, but can you give us a little bit of what your entry point was into the industry and how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, it's interesting, getting ready for this talk, I was like, God, yeah, NASCAD really was a thing. So knowing people that work at NASCAD now and assuming just art schools through the ages are not only a place to go and learn things, but they end up being this community hub connected to the galleries and the jam spaces and rock shows and anything creative in any community. So NASCAD really was that beating heart. And so even if I didn't go to school with people at NASCAD because they came after or before me, certainly everybody I knew that was creative had some kind of relationship with that place. So because of that, even when I was still studying, I was asked to do a gossip column in The Coast, which was called Trouble Anonymous, which was kind of wild because they put my name on it. So it wasn't anonymous at all. So I totally changed the vibe of that column as soon as my name ended up in the byline. But because I had that column, when I moved back to Toronto, I got 2 columns in iWeekly. So that really helped me on my journalism tip, even before I went to journalism school, which I did. Because I was at NASCAD and super interested in events and bigger ideas, I ended up on the board at the Khyber Center for Arts, which also helped me in lots of ways, knowing people here because Khyber, carried some weight outside of Halifax too. Super 8s I made in class with James McSwain, and then learning how to do that, I ended up making some Super 8s that were in a festival in Toronto, and also a music video I made in the green screen room, which I don't know if it's still there at NASCAD, for Tigra Benvie, who was in Thrush Hermit, ended up showing at the AGO, which there's no way I would ever be showing at the AGO. It's not the kind of work I do, but because of just that time and place, I was asked to be in a group show there. So that was really awesome. At the same time, as I talked about before, that sort of communal spirit, I've worked on so many other people's music videos or films or rock shows, which then became a professional thing. I was a stylist for many years for music videos in my early career. I also was an IATSE, which started in Halifax and I brought to Toronto as an on-set dresser, as a scenic painter in the art department. And that certainly got me a ton of set experience and understanding that part of the film world. But I found that for me, the physical labor of film wasn't something, you know, when I was like old and like 26, I was like, ugh, I can't do this for the rest of my life. So I ended up coming back to Halifax and going to King's to do my journalism degree. And I ended up through that working at CBC for like 12 years, running the newsroom at CBC National for News Network, doing special projects, working on federal elections. I did like 250 small features for the Olympics. I worked on As It Happens in Q and in the arts and blah. I did a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But, you know, I also got kind of bored with that. So when the Banger opportunity came up, I was really excited to leap from that and into music documentary because, you know, as I go into different places and did different schooling, you know, truly the only thing I learned, not to throw total shade to other schools, but the only thing I really learned at journalism school was don't trust anybody and don't always get like an eighth source. Like just don't believe anything you're told. And I don't know if anyone knows, there was a teacher there named Bruce Wark who used to write and he's around, but he was also like, don't get comfortable. And I was like, okay, man. But it really helped me. It just really helped me keep my DIY mentality and like, let's put on a show and let's reach out to people that you know. So, you know, the person that I'm working with now as my composer on the film that I'm about to premiere is a guy named Murray Lightburn who's in the Deers. But I met him because of my stupid gossip column. I ended up as an MC for a party at the Marquee. And the Deers were playing, and that's how I met the Deers. But then I worked for them for 2 years, and we've been friends since then. And now I brought him on as a composer on something that we can actually pay and do things. But a lot of people I work with, and a lot of people that I knew at NASCAD, I'm still working with in some way. And so that, you know, those early collaborators really help you form who you are, but also if you're in any creative industry, you want people that understand you and you want people that are going to push your boundaries. So yeah, that path, you know, I bounced around a lot of places, but those early communities that I built in Halifax are still with me now.
Yeah, amazing. The power of a creative network. Hey. Cassie, what about you? You stayed in Nova Scotia, and I imagine that there's lots of connections that came from NASCAD into the industry you're working in now. But can you tell us a little bit about the path from art school to film and theater?
Yeah, it was a bit funny. So when I did the animation class and I started to figure out a bit more like, oh, I'm interested in working 3D, the building of characters, creatures, painting, set design. But what is that? It was still kind of like a question mark to me. And moving to Halifax introduced me to HalCon. And I never knew anything about a Comic-Con before HalCon. And I saw all these amazing costumes that people were making and the props they were making with them and the makeup that went into it. And just so much work went into these costumes. And that really fascinated me. And I thought, well, maybe I try cosplay to kind of practice these skills that I think will later be helpful in whatever that is. So I started doing a lot of cosplaying, and I actually had a professor, Jeff Dom. I did an independent study with Jeff, and I said, you know, I think I'm interested in puppets. And I had this idea for a cosplay that involves a puppet and blinking eyes and all this stuff. And he said, okay, do it. And off I went to make this puppet. And I did, and I showed him, and he said, well, okay, but I'm not going to grade you unless you enter the costume contest. Like, oh, crap. Like, I didn't, okay, nerve-wracking. So I entered the HalCon costume contest, and I won my category with this puppet. And the folks who won in their categories, we all got like a little goodie bag. I think it was a gift card, but then there was an invitation to a wardrobe department tour at Neptune Theatre. Like, oh, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I went to Neptune Theatre and a bunch of other people there from the costume contest. We got a grand tour from Helena, the head of wardrobe. And at the end of it, she said, if you have any questions, reach out to me. Like, I am here to teach. I'm here to pass on knowledge. If you want help with the project, let me know. And I was the only one to reach out after the tour to thank her and ask her to teach me something. So that really kind of opened the door to Neptune. And she remembered me as a puppet person. So that was really cool. And the cosplay stuff I was doing it has helped out a lot with what I do. During all this as well, as I was finishing up my last year at NASCAD, I reached out to someone named Mark DeVoe, who is a makeup artist, and I became his apprentice for a number of years as well to learn about prosthetic makeup. And it was funny, my connection with Mark was my boyfriend's mom's co-worker's ex-girlfriend's father's friend was Mark.
So Nova Scotia.
So Nova Scotia. And I reached out to him and I went to meet him and we just clicked really well. So that I was learning about prosthetic makeup in the film world while also starting to work at Neptune as a props person / costume / wherever they need me person. And yeah, that's kind of been my path from NASCAD. I've fallen into this world of theater and film.
You talked a bit about how computers aren't always your jam and you really love the kind of tactility of the practical effects and of these props.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that love or about some of the like skills you've learned in like that puppet, for example? It's like so dynamic, and I'm assuming someone with the arm with the little critter.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about practical effects and props a bit more?
So with like sorry, can you just like with practical versus something I'll mention about that's really interesting is I'm not good with computers, but I'm also aware computers can be a great tool, especially with film and theater is becoming a bit more of a popular tool. And everyone's good at something, no one's good at everything. So recently with my art practice, what has been happening is I'm only one person. And well, that's cool. I'm getting too busy a lot of times. And I've connected with a couple of artists that work on computers to do 3D modeling. And now I'm submitting my sketches to them, and then they create the thing 3D. They might print it on a printer, give it to me, and then I go through a whole process of making that. It could be a puppet, it could be anything, making it a practical object. So it's been really interesting. Like I said, I'm not one for computers, but now I'm connecting with people who are skilled with computers and we're going back and forth with projects. It's a really interesting collaboration. And I would say, though, something that's interesting with theater and film is film you can get away with quite a bit. Fix it in post, a lot like to say. You can reshoot things, multiple takes, all that good stuff. But with theater, it's live every night. And everything has to be perfect every single night because there's no redoing. And I think that's also a really charming aspect of the practical world within theater is how perfect everything needs to be every night. And you get one shot every night for that one thing. The one thing out of the 1,000 other things that needs to work. And you have to think about that while you're building things. You have to think about how that actor's using it. How will it hold up over 80 shows? Whereas with film, you might just need a couple takes of an object, maybe, and it's done. You might never see it again. But theater, there's a lot of overlapping with practical and film and theater, but theater, you almost have to build things bomb-proof, I find, and film, you often maybe make multiples if you can. Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that difference, but that makes complete sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amanda, can you talk to us a bit about working in a film industry that is also kind of overlapping with the music industry, and what that kind of like cross-pollination of art looks like for you at Banger.
You know, it's interesting. So early, as I mentioned, in my career, I worked on a lot of music videos, like, I don't know, 60 different music videos in whatever capacity. And now I feel like I'm at the other intersection of film and music, which is music documentary. And music docs have really changed over the years. They're just documentaries in general are having more of a narrative approach so that there's better storytelling, and it's not just here's the facts and this is what you need to know, and we're just like shaking our finger at you the whole time. So, you know, in doing that, you're working with everything is collaborative, whether you're working in music or film or any creative thing has to be collaborative. Otherwise, it's just an idea or an expression of one person. But there's so much technical and there's so much money and there's so much time that there's nothing I've ever done in film or TV that is really one person's vision. It has to be a bringing together of people in a way that is a shared vision in my mind. So working with people on both sides of the lens, and then certainly talking especially to musicians or artists or image makers or whoever it is that we're talking to in docs, the one thing I really see, and this is what I, you know, tell people coming up if I do panels or mentorship or whatever, is just listen to a lot of music and watch a lot of films, because references are key. And there's both the needing to know as you get to know, as working in the industry for a while, you get to know vocabulary so you can talk about a transitional zoom or whatever look that you're trying to do. But honestly, people just love movies and film and music, and that unlocks pieces of people's creativity, of things that they saw, they love, they want to create, they want to do. So really, if you're in some meetings that we have when we try to figure out how to make something, you'd think, well, we're just doing a pastiche of all these different songs or all these different movies, but that's a shared vocabulary that we can actually talk about approaching things. And that's not just in, you know, for the production team that's trying to figure out how is something going to look. When I'm interviewing people, I'm bringing up movies and music to them of what I think they've done, whether they're a musician or a music video director or whoever, or a choreographer, whoever it is I'm interviewing. And then we can go back and forth about what their influences were or where they got those ideas, because there is something so universal about being able to share your favorite movie or share your favorite music. And that really connects to the people that actually make music and film. So that's something I didn't really know. Like, I knew that when I was young, that I loved things, and I loved finding people that I could nerd out and talk about films that maybe weren't the #1 films out there. But actually working with really creative people all the time, all we do is just share references all the time, because it gives us a palette, it gives us a starting off point, and it just gives us something where it's like, oh, that's the filter that we're actually going to try to put this through. So yeah, that's the main thing I would say about that intersection, is you would be surprised at how much reference that we actually pull from to do things.
Well, I love the idea of thinking about references too. This is one of the questions I was wondering if we would get to, is thinking about, was there a particular film or piece of music, like video that really struck you when you were learning about the industry? Or alternatively, is there something you look back on now that you have this experience that you have a new appreciation for working in the field? It's kind of a long question.
Well, I can say it in two parts. You know, growing or having my formative creative years in Halifax, I'd say film-wise, there were two places, and that was Critics' Choice, which was this amazing music, this amazing video store, rental store that was downtown, and I think it closed in like '99. But Leanne Gillen and Deanna Bowlby, who ran it, just like had the best taste, and you would just go in and just be educated more than anything you could educate yourself anywhere else. So Critics' Choice was key, and there was a rep theater called Wormwoods, which you just went to what was there, because then you would just watch it, you'd be immersed in another world, and that just really helped my brain see things that there's no way I would ever have found on my own. But for me, and I really remember this because I've been thinking about it a lot on my last project, was there was a VHS copy of Paris is Burning at the Halifax Library that I took out, I don't know, 10 times more, probably over many, many years. And that's a 1990 doc about the 80s drag ball culture in New York City. And watching that, I was like, I want to make docs. Like that's why. It's from that tape when I'm super broke. So I'm at the library because I can't even go to Critics' Choice because I have no money to rent from them. So just being at the library, and I just finished, and we're having our Canadian premiere this Saturday of a film on a Black trans singer called Jackie Shane, who, and we're super excited about that. I've been working on that for like 6 years. And Paris is Burning was a real guiding light for us, for all of us. Some people I introduced that film to, some people really knew it. Some people in the film, I hope you all get to see it someday, you know, basically lived that experience. We're a part of the drag culture of New York in the 80s. And so there was something about it that it was a world that I didn't know anything about, but was interested in. But the human stories that were able to emerge from it, and the way that the filmmaker was able to get that trust and have the conversations with people that were there, I was like, well, if I can ever get that good, that would be my dream. So yeah, I think about Paris is Burning in the Halifax Library, yay VHS, a lot. It was that one piece that made me do what I do now.
I love that. Is the Jackie Shane doc out yet, or is it coming out?
So we had our world premiere at South by Southwest last month, and we're having our Canadian premiere this Saturday in Toronto. We're playing in Vancouver in a couple of weeks, in Maryland, I think next week. And it'll be in theaters in, I think, late summer. And we may see if we can, if we aren't in theaters in Halifax, we'll do a special screening, or maybe work with the festival to do something there. But it will be on Crave at some point later in the year. But it's such a big, beautiful film that I really hope people get to see it on the big screen.
Oh, that's so exciting. Okay, we'll keep our eyes peeled. Cassie, can you tell us a bit about, sorry, now I got distracted because I'm thinking about that movie. I'd love to hear a bit about the film industry in Nova Scotia. Can you talk about, you described it as kind of like you thought it was, what was your wording, like returning or revitalizing, like there seemed to be kind of a hopeful perspective on the film and television industry in Nova Scotia. Can you talk a bit about what working in that industry is like, and any advice for NASCAD students who are interested in maybe entering into the film industry in Nova Scotia?
Right. So yeah, the film industry is going well. Like it is a busy, especially this year, it is busy. There's a ton of productions on the go. So for folks that are interested in maybe getting involved, I would recommend reaching out to the IATSE 849 office. That's where the union office local is. So you can ask questions and kind of get some more information. There are some trainee programs as well. I'm also part of a young workers committee as well. And we're kind of trying to work on ways to streamline folks that are maybe graduating and how to get into film. What is that? Because oftentimes you kind of get thrown into it. And I don't think that's always the best way. I think there could be like a training program to guide folks for their first few days on set, because it is such a hectic environment. So it'd be great to give new people the tools they need to navigate those first few crazy days before they kind of fall into the groove of things. So like, yeah, my advice is to reach out to people, reach out to the office, and look for the resources. I think myself included, I mean, I didn't know about it for so long. And if I had reached out earlier, I probably would have started earlier, but I just didn't know. So that's what I'm trying to tell a lot of people is look for the information. And then it is there. There's information available. And there's people willing to guide you as well through the process. as someone who does mostly just makeup on film sets now,
Mhm.
my advice too would be to always practice when you can, and not to practice when the job pops up. I think there's oftentimes people will, because the makeups that we do, I mean, today we did a 3-hour makeup. It's hard to practice a 3-hour makeup at home, but it's good to do. And so you're not practicing on the day, learning how to use a new makeup palette on the day. Um, and learning at home in your spare time before a job could just be looking for information online. It could be reading Reddit pages about what people like to have in their makeup kit, finding YouTube videos. YouTube is amazing. It's a great resource. So you don't necessarily have to be applying makeup every day when you're off school or off work for the day. You have to find someone to put makeup on. You don't have to be building prosthetics every day, because you could just be watching videos on it. You could find a good book. You could reach out to someone, even on social media. Maybe you follow an artist that you really like. Shoot them a message and maybe they'll reach back to you with something to offer you information wise. So yeah, just don't practice on the job, practice in your spare time, and then you're set up to succeed once you actually come to the film set.
I think that's very solid advice to be so proactive, both in kind of your own training and in outreach. I think that's really
Mhm.
smart. Now I remember what I also wanted to ask you was I wanted to ask you the question and asked Amanda. I'm curious to know if there was a piece of media for you growing up where you thought, I really want to know how to make that, or if now that you know how to make things, if there's something you look
Mhm.
back on and say, wow, that's like, I'm really impressed with how they did that, or I want to know more about it. But
Right.
yeah, were there some kind of like media objects for you that really stuck out?
I remember loving Jurassic Park. I was probably way too young when it first came out, but my parents let me watch it and I was mesmerized by how they did the T-Rex and the raptors. And I couldn't really wrap my head around it. But I was so fascinated by these effects. And also like watching the old Star Wars movies growing up and the effects in that, how they use miniatures and they did use stop motion in the old films. I found that so interesting as well. And I'd say like I had an interest in those movies growing up when I was very young. And then as I was entering like junior high, high school, I was on YouTube more and I discovered behind the scenes videos. And that kind of was inspiration. I didn't know it at the time that I could do it though. I just would watch these videos and think, oh, that's Hollywood. That's not me. Like it will never happen. It's just this world that I thought could never be reached for me. And I'd say theater wise, I grew up, we didn't have theater where I grew up. There was no theater program, but we had mermaid theater stopped by my elementary school. I must have been about 7 at the time. And they were doing this project on endangered species of Nova Scotia. Um, and it was all with puppets. And one of the puppets they brought out at the end, I could have this wrong about which animal this is, but I know that Nova Scotia used to have, I think, elk here or caribou, one or the other.
Sounds right.
Um, they went extinct, unfortunately. And as they're telling the story, they did bring out a puppet version of this elk, caribou, deer creature. And I thought it was amazing that this thing was physically in front of us. It was beautifully made, but we all knew it was a puppet. You all knew it honestly, it for legs, it didn't even have legs. It had like a bed sheet hanging off the bottom of it. And it didn't matter the way they moved it, the way they painted it, you would believe it's a real animal. And I think about that puppet even today when I'm making puppets now. I think about that one elk puppet and just how much of an impact it made on me. I had no idea back then just how much of an impact it made. So yeah, it was a lot of like I said, with movies, watching movies, not thinking it was possible until NASCAD
Mhm.
and puppetry. I just still remember that one puppet show and how it stuck with me. And then I found out which theater it was. I mean, a few years ago, I started thinking, what was that show though? I don't remember the name of it. And then I've now connected with mermaid theater, and it's been pretty cool.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amanda, I'll come back to the question that I'd asked Cassie previously. Can you tell us a little bit about the Toronto film world, or kind of what advice you might have for NASCAD students who might be looking to break into the industry that you're a part of in Toronto?
Well, obviously it's pretty huge, not only for, Hollywood North type things, but there's broadcasters here, there's TV shows, there's news programs. So there are a lot of things. There's music videos that are being made here. There's two unions. So there's IATSE and NABET, which are possible to get into, but every once in a while they'll open up, especially when there's a surge. But I would say my advice would be think about what you want to do. I was lucky enough that I've done a little bit of everything. So worked in music videos, worked on feature films in like the art sort of zone, and now I'm in documentary, and they're very different. Like they're very different budgets or very different crews, but there are some things that are very similar, like not only how to behave on a set and how a set should be run, but how do you prep so that you can execute what you need to do on set. As Cassie was saying, like, yeah, it's good not to practice on the day. You actually need to be super prepared. So you're just letting it happen, and let the magic happen too. That can only happen when all those craftspeople and actors and thinkers and directors are together. But in my world, so in documentary, it's like, yeah, think about what you want to do in the field. Do you want to direct? Do you want to produce? Do you want to create things? Do you want to work with camera? And there's lots of ways to get into those worlds. I would say if you're, right now it's a good time if you're a member of an underrepresented community at all. There's so many programs, like BIPOC Film and TV is one of them, Hire, the Trans Film Mentorship, who I worked with on the Jackie Shane program. They are amazing and are so connected to every level of every show, that connecting with them, if it would work for you to be a part of that community, I'd say please go that route. Because for me, anytime I work with somebody either through a program or an internship or whatever, I often end up working with that person again because they're keen, they want to do it, and it's just how we met. It doesn't mean that I'll never see them again. It's just a foot into the door. But if you don't have that community access, then I would say honestly, PAing is really good to understand set, not only etiquette, but just the flow. And you may be able to see how people are and what kind of thing you'd like to do. There are lots of Facebook groups. One of them is called I Need a Producer /Fixer /something Canada. And it's on Facebook. There's like tens of thousands of people in that. But every single day I see dozens of call out for PAs or for people for low budget. There are ways to get on and get to be a part of a group, and just to learn and to make enough money so that you can actually exist. So you're not, dipping into your savings, your parents' savings, or whatever it is. But PAing is a really good way to start, and just get the practical experience and leads to get in with other people. But one thing I really wanted to say about this too is just back to the collaborative nature. I've been working with a lot of people, and there's one group of creatives that I love working with on all my projects, and it's actually somebody that I met through people at NASCAD. So Marcia Connolly left NASCAD and went to York to do her doc program, and one of her editors on her first films is a guy named Jared Robb, who I never thought about, but his name came back to me when I was hiring for This Is Pop, and because I knew him through Marcia, who I trust to the end of the earth, I was like, yeah, I should talk to him. And I looked, and he was an editor on Nirvana, the band, The Show, and part of this like creative collaborative group that I knew came from his time at art school and at York. And I always just trust people when they are able to work with people for a long time. So he ended up directing 2 of my episodes for that series. And then he and one of his collaborators were the heads of animation on my Jackie film, which we have like 40 minutes of rotoscope animation. And they pioneered a whole new style of animation. And, he also just got a CSA nomination for being the cinematographer on Blackberry, which is a huge film. But I can tell you that group of guys that made Blackberry, which is getting so much DAP and is so good, are really just people that always take turns working on other people's projects and do a lot of stuff for free, do a lot of stuff for just cost. And then every once in a while, something comes along where you can actually get paid. So, I really like give kudos to Jared and his group of people and lots of other people, including my own creative collaborators, where it's like, no, if you can actually find people that can spark things in you, make you want to try things, that scrappiness that you learn at art school, that if you can continue that as you develop your career, people really like that. It helps, especially when there's not enough money to do what you need to do. But
Yeah.
storytelling on screen is a problem to be solved. There's always like so many opportunities to go in so many directions. And it's like, okay, what's the best version that we can actually accomplish? And then how can we make that even better? And there's nothing I've learned from, my journalism days or from older people that are just telling me it has to be a certain way. Anything we've done that's ever interesting is just based in the gameness of DIY and understanding, even as Cassie said, hey, I want to try this. And your professor's like, just do it. That just do it action is in any good program, any good film, any good TV that you see. That's what makes it special.
That's so interesting too, because I think I see that mindset in a lot of artists because the money isn't always upfront, that you do have to have a kind of, scrappiness and willingness to collaborate and help and find that creative energy, even when the structure is maybe not in place. So it's cool to hear that an artistic mindset is so prevalent in the industry like that. Yeah. Thanks, Amanda. Cassie, we heard a bit about Amanda's upcoming project, but I wanted to hear before we open up to questions, is there anything that you're working on that we can keep our eyes out for in the next little while?
Yeah. I mean, I am working on From season 3 today. So that will be out at some point. This summer, I'm working on a couple film projects. I can't really say their names yet, but they involve puppets, which is really cool. There's some kind of weird body horror stuff happening with those projects too, which is a really fun and interesting challenge. And then, I mean, July will be here before I know it, and that's when I will be going back to Neptune Theatre full time. To be their puppet builder for Frozen and Little Shop of Horrors. So I'm very excited about the next season at Neptune, especially. It's kind of my dream season. So yeah, that will be 2 big puppet shows at Neptune Theatre. That will keep me busy till about this time next year.
Oh, cool. Well, yeah, and Little Shop of Horrors is so known for like a large scale puppet of the plant, right? Of Audrey too.
Yeah.
Will you be working on that puppet at all? Do you know yet, or is it too early to tell?
It looks like Neptune, I think Neptune is looking to build it. I mean, there's always a chance with budgets and whatnot too that we might end up renting, because the production has been done multiple times. Right now, the talk is that we would like to approach the idea of building it, and I would be that person. And even if we do rent it, there will be some changes that need to happen. So I will be working on that show in some capacity, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, exciting.
Yeah.
That's great to hear. Well, thank you guys. We have about 10 minutes left, but I wanted to open it up to our audience. If anyone has any questions, you feel free to either pop your video on and ask Amanda and Cassie something you want to know, or pop it in the chat and I can read it out. And if people are feeling shy, I've got more questions up my sleeve, but I thought I would open it up now to the audience. So we'll come on in if you have anything you'd like to ask Cassie and Amanda.
Hi, you two. I think I've met both of you before at NASCAD or circling thereabouts. It's been quite a while. I was wondering, Cassie, if you've finding a lot of folks coming in from out of town. So the Toronto crews, how do they find you? And maybe Amanda, do you know of a lot of crews coming into Nova Scotia? I'm working in a studio here and also teaching at NASCAD. So sort of advising people a little bit about how to get experience, or what kind of experiences there are in film and TV. Not so much theater, because that's not my experience, but here in Nova Scotia. So the Toronto, it seems like it's largely Toronto to Nova Scotia, kind of back and forths. Does it feel like it's a busy time for those right now? Or are they, Cassie, maybe, are they coming up from the States still?
I would say right now we have a lot of folks coming in from Toronto to do work. We're small here, so we have so many productions. It's exciting, but also the amount of crew we have is limited.
Yeah.
So folks are coming to Nova Scotia to work, mostly from Toronto. We've had a couple that I know that have come in from BC as well. And I'd say too, with Nova Scotia, we do have people that come for, they say they might come for one show, but then they end up falling in love with Nova Scotia and they might be around for a few seasons because they really enjoy coming to do that one show. Then they go back to their family. Or they might end up moving as well. COVID was an interesting time because I'd say we gained several members because of COVID. People moved back to Nova Scotia who had left originally because of the tax cut to go work in Vancouver, Toronto. COVID hit, and now they've come back. So it's been a lot of people coming in. So I'd say too, because we're so busy and we've had to have more people come in to fill those spots, is also a good time for people to get involved because there's so much happening. So yeah, it's just a busy time.
Yeah, and I can just speak from, in docs, we're such a small crew, so it doesn't really totally apply, but I've a ton of friends that are still working in Nova Scotia, and then a ton of friends that work in the industry here. And, it's because of the strikes and just the way that things changed a little bit in the industry and things are still picking up. It's been slow. Like, I've been shooting a lot in LA, and I know that just my LA crews are like, it's just picking up now in terms of, it's harder for me to book people, but it was really easy to book people like 2 months ago because with all the strikes, things were just like not happening. And so that's why a lot of Canadian productions were happening, because there was like just different unions involved or whatever. But I'm always a little bit jealous of feeling, whether this is true or not, that there was always work to be had in Nova Scotia if you were in the zone, but there wasn't always work to happen here. It's also a huge industry here. So people, you're fighting for fewer shows, but it does feel like I know a lot of people from Toronto that are going to Scotia to work right now, as opposed to the other way around.
It's curious. I let my union membership lapse a number of years ago because, when the strike happened, not the strike, the tax cut happened, the industry was kind of decimated, and things changed in my life where it didn't make sense for me to be a member at the time. But I'm curious about, maybe trying to organize that again. I've been building for specialty props in the summer times on occasion, so I'm hoping that might see me through if there's enough specialty props, but otherwise might have to try to rejoin the union to kind of jump on crews again, which it's great in some ways and also difficult to maintain that life in other ways. Yeah, it's a busy time.
I was curious to know if either of you are, like, you're working in very creative fields, as we've discussed, but I was curious to know if you have kind of creative projects on the side, or an independent art practice, or what your kind of outside of work creative production looks like these days. Cassie, what are you working on independently at the moment?
Honestly, not too much. I'd say in the art world, I'm quite busy that when I come home, I like to kind of just relax and not think about too much art related. But I'd say though, with all the art related jobs I'm doing, what I do love to do is garden and plan gardening and I love picking flowers and doing flower arrangements around my house with the flowers I've grown that year. So I do think that is kind of an art outlet I have picked up while balancing makeup and puppet building and prop building. It's been kind of my little joy on the side.
Yeah, and often when I ask this question to alum, I will phrase it as either like, what does your art practice look like? Or like, what does your rest look like? Because I think sometimes
Yeah.
there's like a pressure to be like hustling all the time and then also like hustling in your creative practice. And I think talking about how creative people find their moments of rest to like be creative
Hmm.
and like just live their lives is also a
Yeah.
really important part of this conversation. So I hope your garden is looking
No,
really lush.
I love gardening. That's my, with all the crazy jobs happening, all good stuff, like I said, but it's busy. I just love coming home and digging in my garden beds.
I love that. Amanda, what about you? Do you have like a creative outlet at the moment or rest practices you're bringing into your work?
It's interesting. I definitely am looking forward to the cycle of both the Jackie film and the doc that I'm directing right now to come to an end, which
Yeah.
probably won't be until early next year. And the rest for me is really travel and just being in other places and getting new ideas. You know, I feel like I fill notebooks with ideas or concepts, and then I use them. And I think I've used up all my notebooks right now. So I'm really looking forward to that, the sort of re-upping. But one of the things that I can do, and that actually serves me really well, is I have a lot of dinner parties and I
Mm.
invite a lot of creative people. So I can, because I'm away a lot, so it's just so I can be social and see people. But I really love talking shop, and whether that's music or documentary or film or what other people are doing, it's not about me at all. It's just being able to talk about other people's projects or my own projects in a way with people that are actively doing that. I really feel it when it's not happening. It just, everything feels like a slog, and it feels like, but if I can ever give advice or just hear how it's working with other people to try to have these creative lives or creative outputs in whatever it is that they're trying to do, it really makes a huge difference. So that's something. My partner is in a band. He's always on the road. I think he's coming back today, but it's the same for him. He wants to be around other musicians and just talking about that experience of creating, but how do you create when you're always on the road? And, you know, how do you put those things out, and how do you give yourself enough space that your brain can absorb new ideas to be able to output into something that may be for money, and it may be for fun, or it may be for your independent thing. So that's something that I know I feel a lot of. I know other creatives that are people that are on TV, people behind the scenes, other directors. It's really, it really, really helps to build that into your life in a way that, if you're lucky enough that you have that all the time, just like, don't lose it. And if you do lose it, bring it back if you can.
Okay, gardening, notebooks, travel, dinner parties. That all sounds really like good advice. I'll take that all into consideration. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. It was so great to chat with you. Keep everyone, as we talked about, keep your eyes out for all the exciting new projects coming from both Amanda and Cassie, and stay tuned for our May talk as well. And yeah, thanks Amanda and Cassie again for joining us today.
Yeah, thank
Thank you
you.
so much for having me.